I mean, if you expect as a product manager that you will just notify your team or your stakeholders internally that the biggest thing that they're going to do in your next quarter is to sunset the feature and expect that you will get standing ovation, that will not happen.
Hello and welcome to The Product Experience. This week, Randy and I talked to the co-founder of Craft.io, Roni Ben Aharon. Sometimes features just don't work out. Roni takes us through how and when to say goodbye.
Roni, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me here.
So for anyone who doesn't already know you, can you just give us a quick introduction? Tell us what you're doing these days and how did you get into the world of product in the first place?
So hi, everyone. My name is Roni. I'm the CPO, CTO, and co-founder of Craft.io. Craft.io is an end-to-end platform for product teams, allowing product teams to do all the day-to-day tasks and consolidate their product data in one place. Before Craft.io, I was working in various companies, including Booking.com and Wix.com. And originally, I'm coming from development. I have a master's degree in computer science, and I started my career as a data scientist, actually, and working with language models, but tiny one, not as fancy as of today. And, I started from the technology side, and I understood that what I want to do is basically impact users. So gradually I moved from algorithm to front-end development. And at Wix.com, I did the shift and I started to be a product manager, and I really love it. I've been doing it for a while and I'm enjoying it. And now I am the product manager of a product for product management, for product managers, which is kind of fun.
Fantastic. Okay, so today we're going to talk about something you've got a bit of experience with at Craft.io, which is sunsetting features. But let's start with the really basic, stupid question, which is, why is sunsetting features so important? I mean, if someone is using something, shouldn't we keep it? I mean, that's what certain people in our company are going to tell us, right?
So it may come as a shock to some of our listeners, but not all the features that we make are actually being used. I know it's a shock, but the reality that there is a variety of reasons why eventually our feature are not being used or not being used enough. Can be just we didn't do a good job, or our product has shifted and now it has a different focus and we need to sunset some features that are becoming less and less important. And another thing that may happen is that the industry and the landscape changes. Basically, new alternatives rise, and suddenly a feature that was essential to you, there are alternatives that you can create integrations and many other solutions, basically. And the reason why not maintaining a feature is, first of all, a feature that it's not really used is making noise. And this is a rough truth, but it's making noise because when you have more and more features, eventually it's harder to onboard a user and onboard him and let him understand the entire system. And when you have a lot of features, at the end, you have a cognitive load and a UX mess. And another thing that we've learned is that when you're starting to have and to hoard many features, at the end, it's becoming harder and harder creating other features that are maybe more essential to our users. And that's because, first of all, you have to maintain the less used features. And that takes effort, and that takes development time and product time and focus time. And you could have taken these efforts and this focus and invested in better features and more needed features. But I think that the tricky part that sometimes we don't think about it is that the real alternative cost is not only the effort that is not invested in other places, but actually building features when other features exist make it much harder at the end, right? Because you have to take into consideration the other features, and then it's becoming complex. It's becoming complicated, both product-wise, but also in terms of technology. So these are the main things that I find it important, why sunsetting feature are just killing them.
And you've got a couple of great examples to walk us through, but Before we get stuck into those, actually, maybe it would be good to get stuck into one of them. But I guess one of the questions for me is, how do you decide when is the right time to sunset a feature? You mentioned there's a few different scenarios in which you might decide to do it, but if people are using it, then there must be times when it's kind of like that decision is a little bit on the cusp. So is it ever like black and white as to whether you should definitely go ahead or not?
So it's never really black and white because, you have a feature that you think that it doesn't work. So first of all, you have to define what does it mean doesn't work. You have no features with 0 users. And even when you see features that doesn't work well, you can always think, okay, how do I improve it? And then you get into the trap. So in our case, in most cases that we had to sunset the feature was in those cases that we start to think about new features and we see conflicts between the new features that we want to build and the existing and unused features that we have right now.
Roni, so let's go into one of the examples because that'll bring this to life. We chatted earlier and you told me a bit about a visual spec feature that you decided to sunset. Can you walk us through the decision? What did that visual spec feature do and why did you decide to get rid of it?
So part of the things that you can do with Craft.io is to write requirements or specifications or spec. Now, you can do it like writing it textually, but another feature that we had was to be able to express a feature visually, and we call it visual specs. In other words, you could upload a wireframe or a mockup, add comments on the image itself, and then add comments and describe how the feature works. After we released the feature, over time, we've seen that the feature is not used a lot, right? And moreover, over the time, we started to have alternatives, right, for visual specs. So for example, we suddenly seen Figma. And so with Figma, you can do the same, right? You can have your wireframes and you can add mentions or comments on the wireframes. And another thing that we've seen is that product managers are using it and using it a lot. Now we were facing 2 alternatives, right? The first alternative is to keep maintaining and competing Figma, but that will cost us a lot of effort and also doesn't promise that we will win that anyway, because product managers and product teams are anywhere using Figma. And the other option was to integrate with Figma. And we decided to go on that approach. But now that we had this integration, we're facing another problem that now we have 2 features that are doing more or less the same in our platform. And that caused a cognitive overload and UX complexity that we didn't want to have on our platform.
Roni, I'm going to interrupt you. Before we go into the lessons you did from actually doing the sunsetting, I've got one more question about the decision, if that's all right. Mm-hmm. So you started to look at this. Were there any customers that were very heavy users of your feature, of your visual spec feature, that maybe weren't quite ready for Figma? Were you looking at this and saying, okay, the vast majority maybe, but maybe some of your most important customers were not in that space, not ready to move? Was that a consideration, or was this one of those lucky times when really everyone who was important was already on the had made the decision for you as well?
All right. So if there is one thing that is worse than having a feature that nobody uses, is a feature that only one user uses, or a few of them. And in B2B business, it might be just your biggest customer that really loves this feature, right? So we had that. We had a few users, a few customers who were really using that, and they were pleased with that. And we had to think what to do with that, right?
So how did you approach that then with, just some of your customers using the feature? Did you have to have a conversation with them before you removed it from the platform?
So before talking to users, first comes a part of the analysis, right? So we didn't know at first who is using it, who is not. And for that, we had to do an analysis, right? We mapped all of our customers. We saw who is using it, who is not. And then came the part to start communicating. Now, before doing the communication with the customer, you have several options or several ways of dealing with the sunsetting. The first option is tell the users, okay, in X month, we are going to sunset that feature. And on that case, this is, well, it's always unpleasant to hear that, right? But in our case, it was not just a feature that involved with like a UX change or UX enhancement. It involved with users' data, right? To remind you, they uploaded images, they uploaded comments, they had the product data in our hands. They invested time and effort, and we just couldn't just tell them, all right, we could have told them that, okay, you have 2 months to migrate your data and finding another place for them, for the data. And the other option, on the other end, you can say, okay, we will take care of all your data. We will find alternative in our product. We'll place your data in somewhere else, and we'll do it by ourselves. And that involves with a lot of migration efforts. And that's, of course, also involves with a lot of the migration efforts involved with a lot of development effort also. And this is like a very complicated process. And sometimes you don't want to have all of this data because, right again, you are keeping the data that you don't, or the features that you don't want to have in your system. So the approach that we've taken is going in the middle way, meaning that we've done migration to all of the images and all of the wireframes, and we migrated them to attachments that we already had in the system, and we want to keep this feature anyway. Now, and about the comments, we've seen that even a smaller amount of users used the commenting on top on the images. And for that purpose, and for these pieces of data, we communicated to the users that they would need to find another place for their comments or add them as part of the description. And we've taken this approach. And now, when we talk to the customers, first of all, you need to do it with a lot of empathy. At the end, you're taking a toy for your customers, you're taking their data, and this is a paying product. They paid for it. And you cannot just take it away from them, and don't refer to it with a lot of empathy. Second of all, our CS team, which is our great customer success team, they communicated really well, and they agreed with our users about what needs to be done, and they got their consent about it. So at the end, it was a long process, but fruitful. And at the end, we managed to sunset that feature.
You say it was a long process. About how long was it?
So it's a process of weeks over weeks, just the planning of it. And then you have to invest more development time in the migration, if you choose to do the migration. And you have to communicate it. And you have to communicate it by emails, by conversations. And if you have good customer success team, they will help you. So keep a good relationship with your customer success team. This is another one takeaway from it.
Did you explore any alternatives? Like, did you think about switching the feature off so that people couldn't do any new visual specs, that kind of enabling people to explore the ones that they've already got, and then just kind of slowly letting it just like
starvation?
Yeah.
Feature starvation. Yes, this is actually an approach that we've done on another feature that we sunset. And in that case, it wasn't as successful as this feature. And I can talk about that if you guys want to.
Well, before we move on to that one, actually, the other thing that I was really interested in with this example is whether you had to do any education of your customers with, something like Figma to explain why you were removing the visual spec feature and how other businesses were working with Figma. And so that was kind of, meaning that that feature wasn't needed within your platform.
So first of all, it's not just Figma, it's Figma and Figma-like software.
Yeah.
So yeah, we did do the communication and explain them. And also it's important to know that a part of Figma one of the main reasons that we decided to sunset this feature, that because we wanted to build new features, new exciting features, and those features could not work with the previous one. And that's important to know. So there is also the carrot and not only the stick. And this is also important to communicate.
Got it.
Hey, Lily, you're the CPO for a product that's just in English. What's holding you back from going multilingual?
Well, in short, it's expensive and hard, and we just don't have the team to manage it.
Okay, so this is where I love AI. Today's podcast sponsors Transifex, that's Transifex, have used AI to solve this problem and help organizations scale and grow into more markets. They help teams build and automate the localization process in a way that just works. And it can sync with tools like Figma and Jira, saving a lot of time for designers, developers, and marketers.
I see that their API would let us upload content, translate, and publish seamlessly, so multilingual updates roll out with every release. Their AI-powered translations keep everything sounding native, not robotic, and you can create and manage your own custom glossary, keeping everything on brand.
It's how you cut time to market, stay ahead of competitors, and delight users worldwide. You can try Transifex free for 15 days. Just head to transifex.com, that's transifex.com, and make global growth simpler than ever.
I love that you took a look at this and said, okay, there are things we want to build. There is a feature that we have that is getting in the way. There are better ways of doing that thing now. And this is not our unique proposition. This is not something that we want to define ourselves on. And we're able to be that logical about it. I mean, you'd put emotion into building this, you were attached to it to a degree, but you went through some rigor and came out with a plan of what to do next. It's something I don't see done often enough sometimes.
Yeah, well, you have to remember that the majority of users have not seen your product yet. So it is important to invest in your perfect product, seeing the future users that will onboard and will fall in love with your product, and you want to make the best product for them. And it's important to note, I mean, if you expect as a product manager that you will just notify your team or your stakeholders internally that the biggest thing that they're going to do in your next quarter is to sunset the feature and expect that you will get standing ovation, that will not happen. It's not as sexy as it, well, it is as sexy as it seems to sunset the feature. It's not at all. And so you don't get the positive points and the applaud from the team, but it's just things that you have to do because you're thinking about the future of the product.
There's a new biography out of Lorne Michaels, who was and still is the producer of Saturday Night Live. And there's this wonderful Zen line in it that he has, which is, the problem with doing a thankless job is no one will thank you for doing it. And I absolutely love that. Ronnie, you mentioned a moment ago about another feature that you sunset that didn't go quite as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that one?
All right. So the other feature that we wanted to sunset was basically we have a feedback portal. And without getting too much into details, the feedback portal is a place at Craft.io for internal and external stakeholders to submit their feedback. And there are certain configurations that we reached like a dead end, right? And we had two ways of configuring this, the feedback portal, that product, and we decided to sunset one of them. And it was after the visual spec successful sunset, so we were very confident about we're really going to nail it, right? And boy, we were wrong about that. So in order to sunset the feature, we started by not allowing new users to have this kind of configuration. So if you had already this unwanted configuration, you could keep it. But if you didn't have it, you couldn't have done that from a certain point, meaning feature starvation. So first of all, we stopped the possibility. We started the starvation of the feature, and then we were left with 2 customers. Now, having those 2 customers using the unwanted configuration yields 2 things. first of all, is a help for us, right? Because if we are going to keep it, we will have every time that we have a new release, we have to check the two alternatives, right? And the second thing is, once again, that's because one of the main reasons was that we want to build new features that can't work with that old configuration. So those users cannot enjoy the new features, right? So on one hand, we have users who can't enjoy new features, and also every new feature, we have to check it, what happens in the old configuration. And that's basically development and QA hell. So we had that plan in mind, and we decided first to stop the usage of the old configuration, and then talk with these two customers and make them work with and migrate their data to the new configuration. Moving fast forward, these two customers are still using the old configuration, and we just couldn't manage to move them from their configuration to the other configuration. It was just too complex to do that. So, and now we have the situation where the new feature actually were forked from the old version, and we need to maintain them both. And we still have aspiration, and each time, a new product manager joins our team and says, okay, why won't we just migrate them? And then we tell them, okay, go ahead. It's yours. It's all yours. And after a while, the new product manager said, okay, let's keep it for a while and do it later. Because it may be very complex.
I feel like this is maybe some subliminal messaging for customer. If you're a craft customer using feedback configuration, which has been
Hint, hint.
This is a very subtle message to stop using it now.
You said it.
You didn't have to come on a podcast to do this.
There is one outcome from the... No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds really tricky and really frustrating that, I can just imagine the dev team and the QA team just being like, I just want to clean up the code base, get rid of this thing. Is there really no other alternative in this situation?
Well, one day I'm sure we'll do that. But,
yeah.
That day tends to postpone every time.
Roni, I've got a question. So it's one thing to work on this from a product point of view, and as you said, keep your CS friends in the loop on things. I'm curious about how you work with the dev team on sunsetting. And you're in the position of being both CPO and CTO, so you get both sides of this. Mm-hmm. In theory, it's ideal for devs. It's one less thing to support in the end, and as you said, it's one less thing to worry about when you're launching new things, and that's great. But I've worked with lots of devs who will take any excuse to re-platform or re-architect something. How do you keep things in control? Has that actually been a problem for you? And how do you keep things, deal with scope creep from a dev perspective?
So first of all, we have a great development team. I love them. And they're super cool, and they cooperate. Second of all, in this specific case, we didn't have a real dispute, a part of that inconvenience in making all of these migration process, because you're doing all the migration and then bang, it disappears. You don't use that code anymore. And it might seem to some developers as a waste of time, but at the end, one of the most important things for product managers is to be able to communicate. And it's not only communication to the stakeholders, it's not only communications to your customers and users, it's also internal communication. Saying the right things, once again, with empathy to your developers, to the CS team, to everyone who is involved in it. Because once again, it's not one of the things that you will get standing ovation. So it's, once again, it's just a thing that we have to do as a team.
The problems that you're having with removing the feedback configuration that you don't want anymore, has that changed the way that you think about adding new features to the platform? Do you consider when you're adding them into the platform, what taking them away also might look like?
Definitely. So one takeaway from all of this experience is that, well, you have features which are purely UX, and for example, if you add a new shortcut, right? So you can remove it, and users might not super like it, but that's fine. It's one of those trials that you do. But features that involves with data, it's really difficult to sunset. And one thing I've learned is that when you defining a feature and that feature involves with user data, think twice if you really want to build it, because take into consideration that the effort of sunsetting, and people don't understand it, the effort of sunsetting this feature takes more time, most of the time takes more time than developing it. It's that hard. So if you have a feature that you're not sure about it, validate it. Think if you want to, if you're not confident about it, get that confidence.
Roni, so you've got some experience with sunsetting features. Is this something that you do a regular review of? Is this something that you have a cadence and say, every quarter we're going to look at, are there things that we want to target for sunset or something like that? Or is this just something that comes up ad hoc? Is it vibes based? This might be a target for it. How do you approach it?
Mm-hmm. So first of all, it's definitely an option to have in some cadence to review your features, to review their activity, how often are they being used or not, and then take a decision. Because once again, regardless of what you are planning to do in the future, if you have a feature that is not being used and it doesn't really serves your needs, your product needs, the right thing is to sunset it. But if, to be honest, in our case is ad hoc, meaning that when we're planning the new features, when we are facing into difficulties with respect to previous features, and there is a good chance to believe that these features are not essential or are not needed or not good for our product, that's when the analysis starts and the talks about sunsetting features, that's when that starts.
And I think we've got time for just one more question. So in your summary, if you like, how would you advise other people who are building products to think about sunsetting features and to do them successfully?
All right. So first of all, the first thing is to think if you really want to build these features, as I mentioned before. This is the first thing. Now, second thing, be aware that data-related features are harder to sunset. And that's a long process. Be prepared that it might be a long process if you do it right. And once again, it's not that fun, but it's just one of the things that you have to do. Think about the alternative cost. If you have doubts and you need to be motivated to do that, think about the alternative cost, about the other features that you don't build, or for the other features that it's super hard to develop and to bring value to your customers. And by sunsetting the feature, you're helping yourself, your team, and eventually your users to get a better product. Also, think about the process, plan it thoroughly. Be a friend of the customer success team. Communicate with empathy. Remember, you're taking something from users, and it might be the thing that they love most. You need to be very careful and be empathetic about that situation.
Roni, that's great advice. Thank you very much for this. We really enjoyed the chat.
It was super fun. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Roni.
Thank you so much.
The Product Experience hosts are me, Lily Smith, host by night and Chief Product Officer by day.
And me, Randy Silver, also host by night. And I spend my days working with product and leadership teams, helping their teams to do amazing work.
Luron Pratt is our producer, and Luke Smith is our editor.
And our theme music is from product community legend Arnie Kittler's band, POW. Thanks to them for letting us use their track.